All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of the Global Reality. I'm your host, Josh Reeves. This is the Tuesday, March 29th into Wednesday, March 30th, 2016 edition of the broadcast. Thank you very much for being here with us for the show. Quite a bit to talk about tonight, so I'm going to do my best to remember to get into all the things I want to discuss with you here on the show. And we'll be talking about some stuff that, as well, we've got a few different things to discuss here with you tonight. But we'll be talking about some of the stuff that a little bit of what I discussed and touched on the last show. If you didn't hear that show, you can go back and listen to that. The stuff I talked about specifically with these, supposed truth tellers and whatnot, and people who claim to not believe in the phony paradigm of left and right, the Hegelian dialectic, the whole thing, and then you see them serving that agenda and dragging people right back into that phony paradigm and getting them to support political candidates and talking nonstop about it, and instead keeping you back distracted again by the circus and the media frenzy around presidential elections, which they turn into really nothing more than WrestleMania, right? At this point, it really is. And so, in the last show, I discussed, the stuff. It's really stuff that I've been talking about and telling you, and really predicted many years ago. And many years ago, I said there was going to be uh, a political candidate who this group, the Council for National Policy, the CNP, I discuss him in my film series, The Secret Right, Volume 1 and Volume 2. Volume 1 came out back in 2009, and Volume 2 came out in 2011. And I began working on these films in 2007. The first week I started the show, and I interviewed Professor Peter Dell Scott, and I was mentioning groups like the Bilderberg Group and Trilateral Commission, stuff like that. And he said, "Well, yeah, those groups are all well and fine, whatever. They're really not as powerful as they used to be. And there's a group that's actually more powerful than both of those groups." And he said they were based out of Dallas. And I just, immediately, that being from Dallas, that perked my ears up. And actually, that was factually incorrect. They weren't located in Dallas. They were founded in Dallas, but he said they were located here. But it was a bunch of people. Yeah, the people who were involved in the Kennedy assassination directly were involved in forming this group, the Council for National Policy, and you can hear all about that and watch those films. They're up in our download shop. And at the end of The Secret Right Volume 2, I show a little bit. It kind of tails at the very end of that movie into what would be my next film, The Lost Secrets of Ancient America Volume 1. Because when I started, and I've been on air now almost 10 years, this is my 9th year. So when I started on air back in 2007, I had just about a month before released my first film, 9/11 New World Rising. And I originally had wanted Peter Dell Scott to come and speak at this event because he comes to Dallas a lot for JFK stuff. And he was busy with something else, some other event, and he couldn't do it. So we got William Rodriguez instead. And so the week that I started my radio show, I had filled in for somebody on a network, and got a good response. So very quickly after that, I was given my first show, because already, I knew quite a people then, so it was easy for me. Even my very first show, I had a guest, Ed Freeman, on the very first show I ever did. Even when I was hosting for somebody else, I was just filling in. And so that week, I was kind of, wanting to bring a guest on in my first week, because I did that on the first show that I did. So I said, well, it would kind of set the bar high for me to get a really, a name guest my first week on my show. And I contacted some people and couldn't, everybody wants to schedule this stuff out. They don't want to do it right there, day of. And lo and behold, I got this email message from Peter Del Scott and said, "Hey, I'm free now. I can come do your event." And I said, "Well, the event's over. We already did it. We had got to get somebody else. But I just started a new radio show, and I need a guest like tomorrow. So if you want to come on, you come on and talk about whatever you want." So he did, and that's when he mentioned, there's this group. You got to look past the Bilderbergs and the Trilateral Commission, all that stuff. Everybody knows about them. Who's really got some serious power is this group, the CMP, the Council for National Policy. And when I first started my show, I was listening to all the radio shows out there at the time, and I never wanted to be in radio or do this kind of thing. And you got to remember, this is before really podcasting became like what it is now. And I mean, this was about a year before I remember I started seeing them a year or two before they started selling like these podcasting kits, in the stores and whatnot with a microphone and an interface and all that stuff. I just had all this recording equipment from being a musician, and I'd had this job some years before where I made some extra money and bought basically like recording equipment and stuff that I had not been previously able to get, with the intention of recording some music and stuff. And you know how it is, you get busy with life with other things. So I had all this equipment around, and I was like, well, I could, I have everything I need here. I have a condenser mic, I have a mixing board, have an interface to the computer. I mean, I could be doing radio shows, and that's when I got the fill-in job. And at that time, I thought the whole reason people were saying, "Hey, you should do a show," because I didn't hear anybody out there was talking about the things I knew about. So I felt that I could add my voice and my opinion and stuff, that my research, into the mix. And so when Peter Del Scott mentioned a group that I'd never heard of, it got me excited. I remember the rush of adrenaline I got, because that's what you want. At least that's what I want as far as being a researcher. I love it when somebody, doesn't happen very often anymore, but it happens mostly when I'm working on these films, and that definitely ties in with this. So I just got all excited when I heard about this group. So that weekend, I did the show Monday through Thursday back then, and I did a Saturday show that time. I Friday night, as soon as I got home, I went and started, what was that group he told me about? And I couldn't remember what it was, so I had to go back and listen to the archive, and then I had to like turn it up because I couldn't hear him what he's saying. And then finally, Council for National Policy, okay. So I go on and I start looking this up and I start researching it, and the first thing that comes to my attention when I start looking for member lists and stuff, I start running into, roadblocks, because they don't make membership lists public, and the ones they do are pretty ancient. I don't think they put out anything newer than maybe 10 or 15 years. They have a couple of times over the past several years. Sometimes they've leaked out from hotels and whatnot. It's always been my goal to go out and stake out one of these meetings and just video everybody goes in and out. I mean, you'll know who's who and who's not after that, won't you? But so far, we've just not been able to do that yet. But I'm hoping we will be able to do that at some point. So he tells me about this group. When I start researching it, the CMP, I start finding, wait a minute, this is odd. And my first reference was, well, I've never heard of Alex Jones talk about this. If this group's so powerful, he was kind of who I was measuring stuff by at that point, because I hadn't gotten to the stuff, yet, where, I suspected him being connected to anything. And that changed very quickly when I started researching this Council for National Policy. And I thought it was kind of ironic, because I had heard, Peter Del Scott on Alex Jones' show before, but he never mentioned the CMP on there. And so I start noticing that there's like a strangely high amount of people who are regular guests on the Alex Jones show were members of this supposedly secretive group that's more powerful than the Bilderberg group and the Council on Foreign Relations on these other groups. It was basically the right-wing Council on Foreign Relations. That's why it was started. But, of course, I proved through my research that both of those groups are all connected back to the Milner Roundtables groups, the Fabian Socialist Societies, International, the Royal Institute of International Affairs, all those big Central European think tanks. They control all aspects of political life here in America, left and right, and they, of course, answer to the bankers and the religious hierarchy as well. That's who they take their marching orders from. It's all compartmentalized, as it all is. So I was on a research tear that weekend. I remember being, just on fire with the CMP stuff because everything I kept digging kept showing. I mean, here's people like, the guy, father of Reagan, Paul Craig Roberts. We used to call him Prune Face. And I wish I had a recording of this. So there was some guys I used to do radio shows on the network I was on with, and they got Paul Craig Roberts, Prune Face. They got him on the show, and I told him beforehand, it's like, hey, you guys let me call in as a caller, and you guys just act like you don't fucking know me from Adam. I'm just some random caller, right? Don't let on that I'm a radio host, and don't tell them you know me. And I'll call in just like I'm a rando caller calling in, and I'll just fucking firebomb Paul Craig Roberts with this CMP stuff. And so I did. I called in and fired up on it, and his tone changed very quickly. He got very, very scared sounding. That's what a lot of these guys do when you bring this group. They get real scared sounding. There's some recordings of Jones, because my listeners at one time firebombed Alex Jones with phone calls with it to the point where he had to address it on air. I think some of that's in my Secret Right Volume 2. But these guys get really scared, and I always wondered why, and it's something I didn't suss out completely. I did a little bit in those films, but it's something I've subsequently learned more and more. And that's where these connections to Scientology tie in too. The CMP works directly with the CIA. They're essentially a CIA front organization, and that's not something that I was ever able to nail down enough to get it in the Lost Secrets Volume 1 or I'm not Lost Secrets, the Secret Right Volume 1 or Secret Right Volume 2 about this group, the CMP. But it's something now that I've absolutely nailed down. And so Paul Craig Roberts, I mean, he's been connected to the Cato Institute, which is another CIA front organization. Who else? Dr. Jack McLam. I remember he was a guy who was a regular guest on Alex Jones' show. He's a member. Jerome Corsi's a member. I mean, the list goes on and on. You can see my films to see more of the people that Chuck Missler, and mostly all these kind of right wing patriot type people. And then I started finding connections to people that were connected to Ron Paul and all this stuff. And my mind was just completely blown. I was just, I felt like I was going through that awakening process again, and it was made even more of a mind fuck by the fact that I had just started doing this radio show. And in the first week of starting it, I'm having my whole belief system and paradigm torn apart again, when I had just kind of reconstituted everything again enough to be able to start doing this radio show. You understand what I mean? I mean, I had just it had taken me years and years and years of research and all that stuff enough to be able to be proficient with talking about it before I got to the point where I was doing a radio show. And here I am the first week, I'm trying to learn it. I don't have a radio voice yet. I don't know how to do it. And so I was in the learning phase of learning how to even do a radio show. And I'm talking about this, all this crazy stuff. And then I get my paradigm blown open again, because I was very much, thinking all these guys were on the up and up and they were truth tellers. And lo and behold, I find out they're connected to this secret right-wing group. And the more I pulled back the string on it, the more I found people don't want to talk about it. There's so many people that are connected into it. And I know now that's because these people are directly connected to the Central Intelligence Agency. And that's the thing about it. So when I got to the end of The Secret Right Volume 2, I end that film, as I was mentioning earlier, mentioning the rock wall, because this guy, who was the longest serving senator of all time, was also connected to this Council for National Policy group. And he's the guy who's been at the forefront in Rockwall. He's from Rockwall. He's a Freemason. And he's been at the forefront of keeping the Rockwall thing covered up all this time. And so I thought when I was transitioning from those Secret Right Volume 1 and Volume 2 films into the Lost Secrets of Ancient America, it was just a kind of a, an interesting thing to see how this seemingly unrelated thing like the Rockwall, like something like, ancient civilizations and whatnot being covered up, tied directly back to this Council for National Policy, secretive right-wing group thing that I had been exposing. I didn't believe that I didn't expect that would connect. I really was happy because I was like, wow, okay. I'd worked so many years, 2007 to 2011 straight through on nothing but, focusing on nothing but the CMP stuff. So I was really ready, but I had been working on the Rockwall film since 2004. That was when I first started really putting it together and doing research on the thing to do the Rockwall thing. So it took me, almost 10 years to make that film. But I was even more blown away when I was making Volume 2 of The Lost Secrets of Ancient America, finding out that, even more connections back to the Rockwall thing and the Council for National Policy thing, especially when you look at, the guy, Roe versus Wade, that guy. I mean, his great grandfather was the guy that discovered the wall, and he's got connections to the Kennedy assassination, and of course, the Hunt Oil brothers, who paid for the wanted for treason posters of JFK to be put up all over Dallas on November 21st, 1963. Those guys connected directly to the John Birch Society, and that he went on to fund and give Tim LaHaye the startup money to fund this group, the Council for National Policy. The big Dallas oil, that was when I connected the dots back to what Peter L. Scott had mentioned about the CMP and their relationship to Dallas. So almost a year ago now, I had decided to make this film, The Spellcasters. And it was, it was the same situation again. I really just was like, okay, I spent the last many years working on the Lost Secrets of Ancient America films. Shot about 60% of Volume 3 and then ran out of funding. I have not been able to get any more funding to finish that film. So I decided I would, I'd gotten this email and gotten contacted by the British television show, who wanted me to come on and talk about Scientology and the death of Philip Seymour Hoffman and all that stuff, which they, of course, cut and chopped and edited and cherry-picked and said I said things I didn't say and didn't show any of the real important stuff I talked about. But it's okay. I had a witness with me, so I have somebody who can verify I said these things. But that was when I decided, okay, well, I've always wanted to make this film about Hollywood and Scientology and mind control. So I should do that as sort of a stopgap between the Lost Secrets films and kind of give me, kind of a palate cleanser, so to speak. And as many of you know, if you've seen some of the little trailers and previews I've put out so far and what I've talked about here, I would never have dreamed that this film would have connected right back to my Council for National Policy work and had connections directly with people like Alex Jones and Jim Mars and these supposed truth tellers. And it has yet again, and it has in a mind-blowing way, and that's why this film has taken longer than I expected it to. And as I'll talk about here in just a bit, with a listener email I want to read for you and go over that we received after that last show, there's just more stuff that keeps coming out and more stuff that I want to make sure gets in this film. And so I keep adding stuff to it. And here's the big thing I've ran into. Here's the big problem I've ran into this film why it's taken longer than I wanted it to. It's because on all my films previous to the Lost Secrets films, I was always, for whatever reason, not for any good reason, just for reason of people asking me and stuff, I was always real concerned about time and the length of the films. And I started discovering that this obsession with the lengths of the film and trying to get as much information in there, but somehow making it as short as possible with the most information was taking me forever to do. And I decided with the Lost Secrets of Ancient America films that I was just going to, fuck it. I don't care how long it is. I don't care how long it takes to make. I'm going to work on this film, and it's not going to be done until it's done and it's right. And that resulted in the 3 hour and 40 something, I think it's 3 hours and 40, almost 4 hours total. The magnum opus that I released with the Lost Secrets of Ancient America Volume 1. I don't think this spellcaster is going to be 3 hours and 40 minutes, though. I think we're probably looking at 2.5, 3. But with that being said, I'm not going to worry about it. I've decided now, as of this week, that I'm just going to. I don't care how long it is. I'm just going to make sure I get every piece of information in this film. If it takes fucking 4 hours to do it, it takes. I don't realistically think it will. But what I'm saying is, if it does, I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to worry about making sure that I paint the most complete picture I can, because it's mind-blowing. I mean, it really is. This stuff is really absolutely mind-blowing. Anyway, we've got an email, and we'll get to that here in just a minute. I want to tell you about a new download pack in our download shop, which you can find by going to my website, theglobalreality.com. And there in the center of the page, you'll see a link that says download Josh Reeves' films, Lost Secrets, blah, blah. Click on that. It will take you to the Global Reality Download Store. We have a new audiobook pack in there. It's $15. It's Josh Reeves Reads Manly P. Hall 4-pack audiobook set, 6 hours, 40 minutes. Includes the books What the Ancient Wisdom Expects of its disciples, The Occult Anatomy of Man, The Soul and Egyptian Metaphysics, and the Book of the Dead, and Atlantis, an Interpretation. Four books, 6 hours and 40 minutes of audio. Very, very enlightening stuff that these people in the higher up echelons of these secret societies believe. And that's what I read them for. Not because it's what I believe, but it's because it's what they believe. Most of the stuff that I read is contrary to my beliefs, not in support of it. That's why I read the Zecharia Sitchin books. I didn't read the Zecharia Sitchin books because I was a fan of his. I read them because I talked shit on him for a lot of years, on air and off air. And then one day I realized I was a big old hypocrite because I was talking shit on Zecharia Sitchin, calling him a CIA and calling him a plant and everything. But I had honestly never read one of his books because I had done I didn't get into researching ancient Sumerian texts and the ancient civilizations of that area of the world through reading stuff like Zecharia Sitchin or listening to Coast to Coast AM or however else everybody gets into this stuff. Mine came directly from my research into the Council for National Policy, looking into the priest class and trying to trace back control as far as I could. And when I traced all the strings back at every turn, the beginning of control went back to ancient Mesopotamia, ancient Sumeria. This is where you had the first governments being formed in the first working cities there in ancient Sumeria. And instead of having priests rather than having governors and presidents and senators and all this, the priests were in charge. They were the ones that ruled over society and made the rules. They were the government. And over time, that never changed. It just went secretive. And they replaced the public version of that with what we see today with these WWF divide and conquer politics. And they've kind of encapsulated the idea of what they do with football and gladiatorial distractionary events like that. And they've now melded that with the political process. And meanwhile, the real people who really run and control things don't get elected. They're elected by blood, lineage. They're elected by their connections. And so this is why I read things like Zechariah Sitchin and whatnot, and that's a lot of times I read stuff that I felt like such a hypocrite. I was like, you know what? I've really honestly never read this guy's stuff. So let me take this book, Lost Book of Inky, let me read it on my radio show. We'll read it, a page or read a chapter every night. And we did that for, I don't know, months and months and months. And it was just something I did for the show. I think it was kind of around the same kind of election type year. So I think a lot of the stuff at that time was like it is now, being revolved around mostly the political divide and conquer stuff. So I just said, fuck it, I'm just going to read books. If there's not news to cover, I'll just read stuff on air. And I said, well, I'll read this fucking Zachariah Sitchin shit, and I'll tell you what I think is good and what I think is shit about it, based on my own research into the topics. And I never expected that would be one of the most popular things that then, still get people to this day. I listen to it every day. I listen to it every week, because I didn't choose to put that out there on the internet. Somebody meticulously pieced all that together and put it out there, and it's just got, an insane amount of views. But the thing about it is that, when I've had people, oh, why are you reading Manly P. Hall? He was evil. No, he actually wasn't an evil person. And he wasn't even a Freemason. People could say he was a Freemason. He was never went through any initiation rites. But he was, at a very young age, very interested in these subjects, and he had a wealthy oil baroness that told him that he would never have to work a day in his life. He'd never have to do anything but search for hidden knowledge and then put it out there. And that's what he did. If you ever read his book, The Secret Teachings of All Ages, he wrote that when he was 22 or 23, and he revised a lot of his other books and never did it. And that, the fact that anybody of 22 years of age could have, at 22, you haven't, when did you have time to live enough life to go all over the place? He went around all over the world and went to, ancient societies and ancient groups and learned everything he could to compile all this stuff. So that's why I read a lot of these things. I read them, don't always read stuff that I necessarily agree with, but we have to find out and sometimes put out there, because it's just like, rat poison. Rat poison is like, 90% good grain that's okay for you to eat, but it's that little bit in there that kills you. And that's how so many of these supposed truth tellers are. So anyway, go check out the Manly P. Hall 4-pack, 4 books, 6 hours and 40 minutes for only $15. It's in the download store right now, along with all my films I've been talking about here. This is a listener email that we got I want to read for you. It says, hey, Josh, hope you're feeling better and doing well. I'm very busy myself, though I had time to listen to your latest show, and I couldn't agree more about the Trump thing that you mentioned. One thing no one is talking about that I've noticed that you may not have noticed is the connection between Trump and the CMP Reagan administration. But, well, of course I have. Again, I predicted this almost 10 years ago. I said that these guys were going to be, we're going to have a political candidate in there one day that was going to be the linchpin that would kick off a new civil war. And this is what they're moving more and more towards. Exactly why you're seeing these type of CMP people and Jones and the rest of them supporting this guy. And again, don't take this the wrong way. As I talked about in the last show, I'm not anti-Trump any more than I'm pro-Trump, or I'm not for any of these guys, not for Bernie Sanders or anything. I don't vote, never have voted, never will vote, because I'm not going to go and say to these people by my vote, oh yeah, your system's great for me, I love it. I just don't like the candidates and they're not for me. No. Participation is what keeps it going, and they count on that, and that's why they put so much effort behind turning it into a big shit show in the fucking media. First of all, this Roger Stone character that Alex Jones has all the time worked on the Reagan campaign, worked on Trump's campaign. Yeah, I mean, the Council for National Policy started during the Reagan administration and was started by people specifically that either supported or were directly involved in his administration, and people that had connections right back to the CIA and back to the Kennedy assassination and whatnot. I mean, you had Bush Sr., who was vice president. He had been head of the CIA. And Paul Craig Roberts, they called him the father of Reaganomics. He was in the Reagan administration. In fact, when I called into that show I mentioned earlier and said to him, asked him about this Council for National Policy, he kind of hem-hawed around for a minute. Oh, I don't know. No, I don't think I've ever heard of that group. First thing he said was he'd never heard of it. That was his first response. He gave about 3 or 4 different explanations. The first one, he'd never heard of it. And then we said, well, we have your name right here. You're on a list. It's a secret right-wing group. They don't make their membership list public. And he kind of went back, oh, well, you just said they didn't make their membership list public. So how could you have my name on a list if they don't make their membership list public? I said, sir, they don't make current ones public. We have 3 or 4 here during the heart of the time when you were working for the Reagan administration with your name on the list. And he got real quiet, didn't say anything. You could hear the hamster wheel just churning in his head, trying to come up with something. Then he after being quiet for a minute, he came back and he said, well, okay, yeah, I remember now. Yeah, I admit I was a member of that group. Yes, but as far as I remember, it was just a support group for Reagan. And I think I hung up or whatever, and the hosts kind of, moved on or whatever. And you could hear that it shook him. You could hear, because they would be asking him about other stuff, and he just wouldn't give. He seemed distracted, wouldn't give total answers. And they were about to ask him another question. He came back and he stopped the host of the show and said, "Hey, let me ask you something. Y'all don't think that I'm a bad guy, do you? Just because I was a member of that Council for National Policy." So then he admitted he was a member. First, it was never heard of it. Then it was, yeah, I've heard of it, but I'm not a member. It was a support group for Reagan. Then he came back and said, I don't think I'm bad because I'm a member of that, do you? I mean, he got. And these guys don't expect to be called on this because they've had such a good run fooling people that now that the sheep are awakening and figuring out the scam, they get scared. And of course, the same old people I've exposed and their connections to the CMP and stuff and Jones are, of course, now supporting Trump because he's their candidate. They always support candidates that only serve their agendas 100%, which of course means serving the agendas of the CIA and the rest of it. This is why Bush. Remember back when Bush was running against Gore and they announced Gore as the winner, and then they came back and the hanging chads in Florida and all that stuff. I covered that in the Secret Right Volume 1. Lo and behold, CMP connected guys, Ken Blackwell and others, who were connected directly to the Council for National Policy and connected directly to the Diebold voting machine rigging going on in Florida, which swayed the election for Bush that year, happened because they met with Bush at a campaign stop in San Antonio, the higher-ups of the CMP, and had a meeting, and they asked him, if stuff like, would he only support pro-life appointees to the Supreme Court and, stuff like that. And basically, because at that time, the Bush campaign was not doing well. He was not doing well at all. And all of a sudden, he meets with the Council for National Policy, tells them he'll 100% basically be their bitch boy, And all of a sudden, his campaign rockets to the top. And this is the same thing we've seen happen here with Trump. And since these guys don't have anybody in their own corners to get there, they've been planning this for many, many years. And again, all this stuff ties in with stuff that's going to be in my new film, Spellcasters Volume 1, which I'm, again, still working on trying to get finished. I'm continuing on with the email here. He claims that this guy, Roger Stone, claims that he left the campaign and is campaigning on Jones's show every week, allowing little opposing views at all. Jones's crew are constantly making excuses up for Trump and covering his ass. It's embarrassing. Phyllis Schlafly has mentioned in the past how she is behind Trump. Phyllis Schlafly is another one of these Counts for National Policy members, and a blue blood on both sides of her family. She's a direct descendant of William Wallace, and compares him to Reagan in her Alex Jones interview and supports him. You are well aware of her connections and support for Reagan, so I don't need to explain any further. Yeah, she's a evil, evil witch. She was sitting in the hotel lobby. I went to go stake out this meeting. I shot footage of her in my film, Secret Ride Volume 1. And I was sitting in the bar having a drink, and I noticed she was sitting across from us in the little lounge area with her handler. And she looked up and she saw me like she knew who I was. And I was thinking, there's no way Celine knows who I am. And when she saw me, she did the strangest thing. She leaned over and she cupped her mouth around her handler's, this lady she had with her, around her ear, and covered her mouth so that nobody could lip read her and see what she was saying. And I happened to walk by, and I heard her talking on a cell phone, Phyllis Schlafly. And she says, and I'd found out that the Council for National Policy were going to be having a meeting the following month in September. And I heard her say, oh, Michelle's going to be at the meeting in September. And this is before, at the time, I was like, well, who's Michelle? Who could that be? There was nobody on the political landscape at that time named Michelle that I thought would be appearing. And sure enough, within the next few weeks after that meeting was when we started hearing about Michelle Bachmann. And, instantly we found out later she had attended some CMP meetings. So yeah, this is just a continuation of the stuff that I've told you years ago was coming. It's bringing about the fruition of the what was written in the book, The Turner Diaries, and I talk about all that stuff in the Secret Rite Volume 2. He also says the whole David Duke thing is another connection. That was that big deal made in the media about Duke and Trump. Both have been on the Alex Jones show in the past year and were the most popular. It's no coincidence that the situation ended up being a great advert and free publicity for Duke. Duke's another CIA operative. David Duke's been a known CIA operative for many, many years. Duke is playing a role in the race war agenda they've been trying to ignite. He's been fear-mongering as much as Jones, from what I've heard. Not that there isn't legitimacy to what he says, but it's all centered around European Americans being victims without getting into a lot of substance and how to solve the issues. Yeah, everybody's pushing that now. Red Ice is pushing all that now. They've been pushing it for a while now. I'm being too general, but it's hard to describe it without typing a blog about it. He also pushes Christianity like Jones and the left-right paradigm, and his name is so closely associated with the KKK, even though he hasn't been involved with them publicly for 30 years. Everybody knows the higher-ups in the KKK are all CIA as well. All these phony groups. Why do you think they've been rolling them out on cue whenever it serves this divide and conquer stuff in the media so much now during this campaign cycle? He's the perfect guy to use to get dirty, legit info and muddy the waters. A lot of the Jew World Order guys can't see it. He just happens to have a radio show on Rent's radio. Rentz also loves Donald Trump, of course. I also heard the Stormfront founder Don Black praising Trump on there. Well, there you go. It's basically a pro-Trump radio station. I heard Jim Mars on there talking about how great Trump is. Yeah, I've connected him directly to Scientology, and we'll be talking about him in the Spellcasters. I was going to email you earlier about something regarding Mars. There is much more to Jim Mars. Yes, there is. I'm waiting for his follow-up interview on Tuesday night on Rents Radio because he's on again with remote viewer Dick Algery, who said he was trained by Glenn Wheaton. Dick said he remote viewed the JFK assassination, but by the end of the show, we got nowhere significant like usual when any of these viewers are involved in anything alternative media ends in some vague prediction that never happened, like Ed Dames. Yeah. Well, the reason Jim Mars talks about remote viewing is because it's part of his connections to Scientology. And that's another thing you're going to see in the Spellcasters. Make no mistake about it. It's documented fact, and you'll see this in my film. Remote viewing was 100% a joint collaborative effort between Ingo Swann and other high-level OT7, OT8 Scientologists and the CIA directly. They worked directly with Scientology, and the CIA worked directly with each other to create the remote viewing program. And Jim Mars' book that he wrote directly after Crossfire was all about remote viewing. And again, there's so much to this. You're going to see all this detailed in the film. It's mind-blowing stuff. And nobody else is exposing this the way I am. That's just all there is to it. Nobody ever has. Nobody's had the fucking cojones to put it on the line and ever make a film about the Council for National Policy, except for me. There's also a bunch of other stuff that connects him to remote viewing, including his book, The Sci-Files. Yeah, Crossover and Oliver Stone. Then there's Sean Stone, who owns his own alternative media called Buzzsaw. He just happened to get Michael Aquino on the show, another guy that I connected in the Secret Right Volume 2, and I'll also be connecting back again to the MK Ultra stuff and Alex Jones and the rest of these guys in the Spellcasters. I suspect the Stone family are involved in Scientology. They definitely have CIA connections. There's no way Stone could operate without them. In fact, I'm sure he got involved with Scientology through the CIA. Sean Stone also, well, probably not. Probably the other way around from what I've researched. At least that's what I found. It was right around the time when he was working on JFK and working with Jim Mars on that he supposedly became a Scientologist for a period of time and then supposedly quit. But, that doesn't mean anything. A lot of these people have secret memberships. They'll claim to the general public that they've quit, and they just do that to take the heat off of them, and then they remain secret members. Sean Stone also worked alongside Jesse Ventura's son on conspiracy theory. He's been on Alex Jones, too. Just so happens he pushes the whole paperclip Nazis took over the CIA as Jones and Mars. That's hilarious. Paperclip Nazis took over the CIA. How could they take it over from the people that made it possible for them to even be here? No. Paperclip Nazis did not take over the CIA. You can even see in my Secret Right, Volume 1, I show how all the guys conclusively that came out of the OSS that formed the CIA were all members of the Knights of Malta. And before that, you had to actually be from Italy to be able to be a member. But after World War II, when the Vatican needed a new boogeyman, and they switched the boogeyman over from being Nazis to being communists, and then, of course, as like von Braun talked about, third world crazy terrorists, and then asteroids, and then aliens. Those guys who were heading up the CIA were some of these guys that I'm talking about that are connected back to these secretive right-wing groups like the CMP that were, funneling monies to Nazis during that time. So, again, to see those connections and to see them connected here with people in modern day like David Duke. And I mean, none of this is a shock to me. It's really not. I've been warning you and telling you about this for almost 10 years. And very few people are still paying attention to it, but it's a fact. And so I think next year, I think for the 10-year anniversary of the show, and the 10 years since I found out about the Council for National Policy next year, since all this stuff is as important as it ever is, and depending on how this election goes, is probably going to remain to be important. I think next year I'm going to make the definitive version of The Secret Right, make a volume 3 that's, because the rest of those were made before I had updated computer stuff. So I think next year, for the 10-year anniversary of me finding out about the CMP, I'll make a volume 3, and I think it'll be a nice cap off to the stuff that I'm discussing here in the Spellcasters film. So thanks to our listener there for that email. I appreciate that very much. And yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, it doesn't matter who you choose. You want to choose Hillary, the establishment fucking tool she is. Do you want to choose Bernie Sanders, who's an admitted Marxist? Do you want to choose? I mean, make no mistake about it. It doesn't matter which one you choose. They're all 100% controlled by the CIA. After Kennedy, they no longer allowed anyone who wasn't in bed and on board with CIA policies to be in the political spectrum. Because people forget, even people that, were pro-Kennedy and whatnot, people forget that when Kennedy first became president, he was just as much of a plugged-in, connected politician as anybody in the modern day. I mean, his dad connected to the mob, and I'm just on and on and on. But when he realized after the Bay of Pigs that he didn't actually really run jack shit, and not just him, any president, and that the CIA would always make calls and make decisions that the president didn't make, and then assign whatever fallout happens to the president as if he made the decision. See, that's the key thing. That's what angered Kennedy. It wasn't just that he wasn't truly in control. That was just the tip of the iceberg. What got him was that these decisions, like the invasion of Cuba or whatever it may be, would ultimately, the decisions and whatever happened from those decisions ultimately would fall on his shoulders, and the blame would fall on his shoulders, even though he did not make the decision for those things to happen. The CIA did. And that's when it angered him. He threatened to tear apart he fired most of all the top guys at the CIA. And those were the guys that had the power to get rid of him and ensure in the political process anymore, anybody who would have the power or even dare to make a statement, I'm going to splinter the CIA into 1,000 pieces, which is what Kennedy said. They made sure they never had anyone even be able to run for office that would even mutter those words. And have you ever heard anyone since then even mutter those words? And the reason why the CIA is so dangerous is because the forces that control the CIA are not, how do I put this? They're not, they're foreign entities. These are foreign entities. These are people outside of the United States who are dictating the orders that the CIA follows and carries out, whether it be Rome or Israel or England. They make sure the marching orders are carried out for the world order. And when I was making those Secret Right films, I occasionally came across some things that tied like Phyllis Schlafly to Scientology, and this whole thing, how they campaigned to get these Phyllis Schlafly and several other you can look all this up, several other Council for National Policy members campaigned in California to get these creationist teachings taken out of the science books, and they were successful at doing that in public schools in California. And then they replaced that teachings directly with L. Ron Hubbard teachings. And at the time when I was making the Secret Ride films, I didn't know how to process that. I didn't know why that mattered, because I never dreamed that there would be direct connections with these people to directly to Scientology, which then again, of course, connects directly to the CIA, because from the very beginning, Scientology has been a CIA organized front organization, and they have used the organization as a front to be able to send, during the heart of the Cold War, they were sending information through Scientology. L. Ron Hubbard was involved in this through his association with the OSS and the CIA. They were sending American secrets, classified information, to the KGB, directly to the KGB, using Scientology as the front to do it. And again, I don't want to give too much away, but you'll see this in the Spellcasters. I've directly connected that to people like Alex Jones and these other people who appear on Russia Today. You notice how Russia Today became like this, it appears like it's some real news outlet, but they have people like Alex Jones and Luke Radowski and Jerome Corsi, people like that on there. Well, that's why. Go type Russia Today, KGB. You can read right there in publicly available information that Russia Today is an admitted KGB connected front. And so that's the things I'm talking about. I mean, that's just a little taste, but I mean, I've connected this stuff all together. Hollywood, black magic, the occult, the OTO, Aleister Crowley, Jack Parsons, Jim Mars, Alex Jones, that Mike Adams Truth Ranger guy who's got the, his whole thing was funded by Stubblebine, who of course ties back to the MK Ultra, the mind control stuff, and all of it. It's just, it's never fucking ending. But if you haven't seen my films, The Secret Rite Volume 1 and Secret Rite Volume 2, the versions on YouTube are crap. We've got beautiful HD versions up in our download shop at my website, theglobalreality.com. Definitely go and get yourself downloads of those. And you can also get a pack for $35 that has all my movies in it, up to Lost Secrets of Ancient America Volume 2 for only $35. They're a little bit smaller file size than the full versions we sell, but yeah, you definitely want to see those films before the Spellcasters comes out, and it's going to be done very soon. Well, it's that time of the month again, folks, and this has been a hell of a month for me, bouncing back from health stuff, and it took every penny I had this month, and I've gone literally broke to get myself back up to health, and I'm still not back to 100%, but this is this is the week we've got to pay our operating costs. We've got to reach 100% of our goal on our operating costs by Friday. As per usual, we'll have a big grand prize pack that we'll give away. It'll have some artifacts and rocks and stones in it. We'll have a real piece of the rock wall in there for you, some various other things to whoever contributes the highest amount. And we're also going to have a special deal this week only. We've never done this before. We've given away 1-year memberships and whatnot for contributions, but this week only until Friday, in order for us to reach 100% of our operating cost goal so we can stay alive and I can finish this film, because we don't reach 100% of our operating cost goal by Friday, it's going to be all game over. So, because it took me so long to recover this month, we didn't get a lot in because I didn't do a lot of shows. And now we're at crunch time. We need everybody's support. But here's the thing. We've done one-year memberships before in the past for a $100 donation. This week only until Friday, every person that donates $100 will get a lifetime membership to the Global Reality. We sell those. They're $1,000. We've sold a few of them in the past. A couple of years ago we did. And they get you a pass to lifetime membership. You'll never have to buy a subscription again. But we're down to crunch time. We've got to reach our goal by Friday. So if you donate $100 between now and Friday, you will get a lifetime membership to our 128K member archives. You'll be a member for life, and you'll never miss any shows. We post up the new ones there first and foremost before they go on anywhere. And then sometimes we post shows to YouTube, but not all the shows go up on YouTube. So, all right, we've got to have your support, and we've got to get these operating costs paid. So you can't beat that. It's $1,000 deal right there. You'll have lifetime archive memberships, and we're going to be ramping up and having a lot more shows as soon as I get these Volume 1 and Volume 2 of the Spellcasters finished here. We got to have your support, so go there and go to my website, theglobalreality.com, and do it today. My name is Josh Reeves. We'll see you next time. Take care.